Well, welcome back to the shop. Today we have a really big build ahead of us. I need to make some tote racks disappear. So for that to happen, I need to make a stop at the big box store, pick up a bunch of cedar and see what I can do. With that said, we got to get busy. I'll see you on the other side. So, with our trip to the big box store behind us, let me give you a little background of how we got here and why we're building what we're building. When we first purchased this property, it came with shelves. They were oddly shaped, and at the end of the day, I hated them. So you know what I did? I ripped them out. I painted the garage, and then I built these guys. Yes, the infamous large tote system. So these came out fantastic. However, as good as they looked, I didn't want to look at them all the time. I even touted them in my last video. But that's when I came up with the idea of, you know what? Maybe we can make these look even better. And that's why we're here today. A few months back, I got the wild idea that I could take cedar pickets and turn them into doors to hide these totes. I even made a proof of concept. So I know it works. I just needed time to do it. So today is that day. So after picking up about 70 pickets, I cut off the dog ears, I cut off the tags, and start getting these guys into shape. And by getting these guys into shape means I need to turn these into flat, usable panels. So if you've ever made a cutting board or a cheese board, this is going to be the largest cedar cheese board you've ever made. These guys are going to be over 8 feet tall and about 2.5 feet wide per panel. And I need 11 panels. And then I found out I'm actually going to need 12. So with that said, we have our work cut out for us. So at this point, I'm trying to get these down to a uniform size. So I'm going to measure, arrange by color, because at the end of the day, these are going to cover the entire side of a wall, and I want to have some sort of pattern. I don't want them to be haphazard or completely random. So some thought has gone into how they're going to be laid out. At this point, we've lost a little height. We've lost the part where the tags were, we lost the dog ears, and the fact that we evened them up, we lost a little more height. But now we need to plane one side, and only one side, because my idea is to glue these to a panel to help support what will ultimately become the largest cedar doors I've ever built. So with that said, I had to send all pieces through the planer, and with a little bit of movie magic, that only took a few seconds. And yes, you are welcome, because that was exhausting. But we're not done yet. Now that everything has been planed, we need to take these back inside the shop, because now we need to joint these potato chips, because it was a warm day and these guys were moving on me as we speak. So with that said, we're going to move quickly and get on to the next part. Well, as you can see, I'm working inside the shop. It's a bright sunny day. I'm working outside the shop. It also helps because these panels take up a lot of space. At this point, I need to joint the edges because I need to glue these up and get them as flat as possible. I think we all know cedar's not very flat. It has lots of knots. It's kind of rough. So that's why we have one side planed, the edges planed, and we kept one side rough, as I said, for glue up purposes later. You'll see. So at this point, I'm going to quickly send everything through the jointer, get the edges as smooth as we can. It doesn't have to be perfect, because again, there's a little forgiveness in these panels because they are so large. So now that the beginning work is behind us, grab every clamp you have and all your neighbor's clamps. You're going to need them. So this is when the real work begins. So the concept is to make panels wide enough to cover each section that houses a tote. So based on the number of totes that I have, I'm going to need 11 doors and a side panel, which means I need to make a dozen panels, 4 of which are going to be over 8 feet tall, and the other 8 are going to be over 7 feet tall. So remember, we lost some height when we cut off the dog ears and cut off the tags, and we trimmed everything up. And the width of these is roughly 5.5 inches, but we all know there's never a panel that's exactly 5.5 inches next to another panel that's 5.5 inches. So with that said, we need to make a dozen panels full length, and then we need to add a foot or two to each panel as well. So there's going to be a lot of glue ups in this particular design, and we need a lot of horizontal space to lay these things out. So with that said, we will be utilizing every square inch that we have. So these panels do fight back, as you can see. The goal is to get them as flat as possible. Again, they don't have to be perfect. There's a little forgiveness, and once we get these glued to a backing, we are going to be able to get things even a little flatter. But you do want to make sure that they're glued up very well, that there's no gaps, because these are not very thick, because you don't want the doors to be extremely heavy, but they do need to be firm and strong enough to handle day-to-day use, which they will be. So with the layout, that part is designer's choice. I chose to kind of go from dark and busy to light, so that way when I put the panels up, it'll develop some sort of pattern on the wall and look like it was done on purpose, because it was, as opposed to random, as I mentioned earlier. So at this point, we are simply going to be gluing up panels and getting them laid out. Again, the concern is having enough horizontal space to clamp your panels up and allow them to dry so you can move on to the next ones. Panel is about 2.5 feet wide, and everything is going to be oversized at this point so we can trim down and hit our target, because each door is going to be unique to the section that it's housing. So everything is going to be large until it's not. At this point, you've developed a panel farm, and every horizontal space is going to be used. And this is what it looks like when you get a number of the panels put together. The longer ones are going to be the top panels. The shorter ones you see on top are the additional panels I made to get the height that we're going to need. And they're going to be joined by a center horizontal panel that will hold both sections together. To reach our desired result, these panels are going to need a great deal of sanding. So to make our sanding even easier, we're going to need to hand plane some of the glue lines and some of the rough sections. It's just going to make this easier down the line. Now, if you don't have a hand planer, you don't need one. You can just continue to hand sand. And you also see me at some point pulling out a belt sander in addition to my orbital sander. But this does expedite the process. And trust me, I speak from experience. So with that done, your next best friend is going to be your orbital sander of choice. So what happens is, once you get the glue lines evened out and you sand it down, the panels start to take shape. And this is the concept I was looking for, because these are very smooth at this point and it just looks very nice and clean. So once you get your large panel all cleaned up and ready to go, we need to get the matching smaller panel. I'm going to keep circling back to the fact that we need to gain a great deal of height, and this is the concept that I use to achieve that. You can do this a number of ways. This allowed me to use a certain design concept, and that's going to be like a horizontal band on all the doors, and this is how I achieve that. So this is the band I just mentioned. So I take the smaller piece, put a horizontal piece on it, and then I will attach that to the larger section, and I will get the height on my doors. So as you can see, your shop or yard or whatever you use will turn into a panel factory if you take on this endeavor. But you can also see that these are starting to look very nice. We've reached the point where we're going to mate the larger section with the smaller section and achieve a completed panel. As you can see, the piece I just flipped over, It's kind of rough on the other side. And again, that was by design. I found that you get greater adherence with the glue if you leave it a little rough. And if you made it this far, and if you haven't already, please subscribe, leave me a comment, give me a like, or share this video. This marks my 1-year anniversary, and I appreciate everything YouTube has done for me, and I appreciate your time. So back to the build. I make the bottom of the top section even so that we can get a tight glue up. Double check everything. Again, everything is oversized at this point. So we're going to glue up the panels and prepare them for a backing. Now, because these doors are so tall, it's difficult, or you have to be creative as far as clamping them together. So what I did was, by creating the larger section and the smaller section, that allowed me to come back later and join them as you see right here. And again, clean that glue up. You'll thank yourself later. So this is the concept. This is the first of the 8-foot doors. So we're gonna let that dry, and we are going to clean up one edge. Now, the key to this design is making sure that the sides of the door are 90 degrees to the center section. You got to keep everything square for this to work. So once everything is square, that's when it's time to pull out the track saw. But if you don't have a track saw, you can do this with a circular saw or your saw of your choice. This is just how I chose to do it. And that gives a nice sharp edge. And once you get everything glued up and sanded down, this is what you wind up with. Now the concept is starting to come together. So at this point, we are ready for a backing. I put it on this hardboard, Equiboard, you can get from the big box store. You can cut this with a circular saw, track saw. I was confident enough to be able to do it on my table saw. I had enough equipment and I felt I could do it safely, and I did. So these sections are just as wide as the panels, and this is where we're going to mate them. This will be the backing, and this is going to help support the panel and complete the door section. And one thing I have to say is you're going to use a lot of glue if you choose to do something like this. But it actually turns out very nice. I was actually using staples on the first couple of doors, but as you'll see later, because I used Tight Bond 3 and weighted everything down, and my tolerances were pretty tight as far as the way I glued it up, I no longer needed the staples. So as you'll see, I stopped using those later in the video. But feel free to be liberal with the glue, because these panels are going to be opened and closed on whatever basis it is when you use them. So the more glue, the better. Don't over glue, but don't be afraid to glue. You'll thank yourself later. Now we have to get some glue on that mating edge. Now, one thing you'll see is sometimes I took the complete panel and glued it up before I put it on the backing. And in like this particular design, I put it together on the backing. There is no proper order. The order is the order, whichever one you choose. But again, because of the length, you have to get creative with the clamping. So you need to hold one side down so you can apply the pressure that's needed. I had to use two 48-inch parallel clamps along with an additional clamp to get the distance that I needed on this particular door. As you can see, like I mentioned earlier, you will need every clamp you own if you do this. Or you can go buy some more. So we're gonna get this clamped up and let it sit and dry for a couple hours, and on to the next. So once I got into rhythm, I kind of batched out the remainder of the doors. I had all the panels made, I had all the backings cut. So I assembled them and set them off to the side to dry. Once that was done, I pulled out the trusty track saw to get a clean edge to match up with the horizontal line. So again, that's key for the design I have in my shop. So I want the wall to have that continuous middle design element. And that you see me pulling out the square at this point to make sure that we are horizontal to that line. And that definitely pays off later. So we clean up that edge, get everything squared up. And again, these doors are still oversized at this point. We are just kind of creeping in on a finished dimension, but we are not there yet. You'll see later I have to pull out the laser level and get the actual dimensions, but the clean lines do help us get there. Now, this is what I call my transitional door. So when it comes to this particular panel, everything to the left of this is going to have a horizontal design element at that height. And when we get to the right, the design element becomes lower and it will be at this height. So as the doors transition from 8 feet to 7 feet, the design element will be consistent and purposeful. So that's why this door is so important at this point. So it is the only door that I have to have a slant in, but again, the difficulty comes in the glue up. Again, with all the clamps and the angles, it just takes a little work, but it is very doable. And to get the height that we need to achieve, I glued up a separate panel and then I cut that to length to match. And that was pretty straightforward. We'll get some glue on that edge, get this panel squared up, and we'll assemble it just as we did the others, because now we just have a big giant rectangle. So again, we use up all our clamps, get it clamped down, let it set for a couple of hours, come back, make sure everything's even, clean up that glue, and we are again on to the next. The one thing about cedar, it's very knotty. Some of these knots come out, there's some imperfections. So what I did was I used a little epoxy and pulled out the belt sander, pulled out the orbital sander, got everything cleaned up. So one thing I do like are subtleties. So these are some of the elements that are very subtle, but they do enhance the final product. So now with the backs on several of the doors, I started to prepare for my hinges, marking the locations. This is the clean edge that we cut with the track saw earlier. So I pulled out my jig, and what I was pointing out just now is the fact that I put that washer on there, and it was just enough to make sure I didn't blow through the front of these cedar panels. Because they were milled to a non-specific size, that's all I needed to make sure everything stayed square and intact. And these are just your standard 35mm hinge holes. This Craig jig, not sponsored, worked perfectly, made for some nice, easy work. So once I had all the holes drilled, I just squared everything up, installed the hinges per design. And this is pretty straightforward, 3 hinges per door. And these are soft close, and they actually worked out perfectly. So again, the most important part is making sure that everything is square with that center design element. So we're going to trim up a few more of the doors, and Again, we're talking about 11 doors and one side panel. So this took quite a while. About ready to hang these doors. We have things trimmed up. We have hinges on board. We're going to mount these shortly and try to get down to those final dimensions. As you can see, we are still oversized. We have one clean edge and the other side is still a little rough, but that's what lasers are for. So once I was able to hang the first door, as you can see, I used the laser level to get a straight line. And I use that same level to make sure that the handles are even across the entirety of the build. If you don't have a laser, you can use a level, but this does make it easier when you have such a large span. So when it comes to the doors, as you can see in this instance, the left door has already been cut, but the right door will be cut on that laser line, and then it will line up with the left door. So that process had to be repeated 11 times. Now this sort of looked like once I got the doors up, and let me tell you, these doors went up and down several times. They had to be measured, remeasured, rehung, adjusted, taken down, sanded, put back. So yes, quite the endeavor. It's gonna line up for the handles. Perfect. As I mentioned earlier, the doors are still oversized. They are cut by the proper width, but we still need to work on the height. And with the chalk line, we'll take care of that next. So I'm really pumped at the way these are turning out. This is what it's like to go from picket to panel. So it took me 4 days to get to this stage, but there was a lot of work involved. Finished on the inside. It's gonna house the totes, soft closed hinges, latch, hardware. We're gonna keep this design pattern going across the entire wall here. But again, a lot of sanding, a lot of gluing, a lot of work, 11 panels in total. We have 2 complete. These are up, but they need to be cut for their space. So we're gonna get to that right now. I gotta get back to work. Well, I'm finally at the point in the build where I get to fit my final door. So I'm gonna remove these totes, take these items out, attach my door, get it trimmed up to size. And now that I've thought about that, I've got to do something to cover this side right here. Because in the end, I'm gonna have to take it all down, sand it, stain it, and then put it back. So I'm gonna go get at it. While we are definitely in the home stretch of this build, there's still a lot of work to be done. It seemed like we've come a long way, and we have, but we still have quite a ways to go. The finish line is in sight, but it's the finish that counts. So at this point, let's focus and get everything just the way we need it to be. Well, fitting this door actually didn't take very long. Once I cleared it out, I was able to attach my hinges, size the door up. So now what I'll do is I'll trim it, and I'm gonna put a cedar siding on it a little bit. So we're gonna just make this a full. At this point of my final inspection, I'm thinking, is there anything else I can do? Anything I can do to make this better? What's next? So at this point, I'm thinking, doors look good. They're nice and smooth. You know what? Let's get them down and let's get them all finished off. So for the umpteenth time, these are coming back down. So with all the doors cut to their final dimension, marked and numbers for their placement, we do the final sanding. Now there's still some prep work to come. There's some more doors we're going to see that need a little epoxy, some spots filled here or there, a little extra sanding, a little extra TLC needs to take place. But it is also time to finish. And that's when you know you're in the home stretch. So with the finished factory in full swing, as I mentioned, there's a few places that need some epoxy, a few knots that need to be filled, and this is one of those moments. But this is actually also one of those very subtle enhancements that turned out just right, because once you get everything sanded down, you actually it doesn't leap out at you. It's actually very subtle, and subtle is good. But again, it takes a lot of sanding, a lot of prep work. The payoff is once you get the finish on there, it just looks fantastic. These doors are actually turning out just as I thought they would, actually better than I thought they would. The design elements and the color really make this thing pop. And although it was difficult, and it wasn't even difficult, it was just time consuming, space consuming, and all consuming, but definitely worth it. Again, once you get into the rhythm of finishing, you get all the panels up, get everything done, you find any spare space to let them dry, and on to the next. Now this is my transitional door. Love the way this turned out. It's a little bit of a linchpin on the wall, and came out very nice. So with that said, speed through this finishing process. Nice color, nice and smooth. And voila. So at this point, we started to hang some of the final doors, get everything squared up. But where the 3 original racks were joined together, that spacing was a little larger. And if you've ever put up cabinets, you know, sometimes you need a filler piece. So I took a piece of cedar and I made the identical section to match the door with the horizontal design element and the length. And I put a little color on it, and it worked out perfectly and fit great. So with that done, it is really starting to come together. You can see the final design, and I'm at the point now where I need to make the end cap, that 12th door, or that 12th panel. So with that, I added an additional 7+ foot panel, and I'm putting the backing on there now. This part won't move, so I actually didn't need to put the inner backing on the complete section. I just figured this is enough to make sure that everything stayed together and stayed as designed and built. So we're going to zip through this process. As you can see, I got away from using staples and was just able to hold these down using cauls and clamps and weights. The glue is sufficient for securing these. And again, please subscribe, like, and share. I really do appreciate you. So one thing I found out is that if I had lifted all of the weights that I brought out to hold these down, I'd be a lot stronger. So by any means necessary, take what you need to get good adherence, all the clamps, all the weights, it works out in the end. And these did turn out to be very sturdy. So we're gonna zip through that. So size-wise, this is my largest build to date. This is a 21-foot run. These doors are roughly 8.5 feet tall. These doors are just over 7 feet tall. We have a continuous design element, filler pieces, 11 doors in total, hardware, soft close hinges, smooth inside. As you saw, it was quite the endeavor, but well worth the effort. This came out beautifully, and I can't wait to fill this up and hide those ugly totes. So what we're gonna do now is put our French pleat up, load some parallel clamps in there, and get this guy loaded up and see how this turns out. So I made this custom matching cedar clamp rack, and we're gonna install this right here. They say you can never have enough clamps, and I think they're right. And this is an excellent use of space. So this is just a look at some of the enhancements I made on this, the racks, some of the epoxy, some of the subtle fillers. Again, the fact that these don't just jump out at you is probably the most important component of their existence. So they help achieve the final product, but they are not the star of the show, and that's why it works. So, as I stated earlier, our next job is to fill this puppy up. So let's get after it and make this thing what it's meant to be. And for those of you that appreciate the numbers, this tote rack system houses 24 6.5 quart totes, 51 27-gallon totes, and one 77-gallon tote for 76 totes in total. Yes, this thing is massive, but my garage is much neater now. So those actually came out very nice. Thank you for watching and making it this far. That was, again, the biggest build I've ever been a part of for my location. And it was nice to make those totes disappear. So with that said, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you're building something, let me know in the comments. I'll catch you on the next one.